Thank you. I would like to start tonight by talking about Paula Ettelbrick, and whose memory Sage so appropriately dedicated this award. Not only did I know Paula for many years, but Paula was also a dear friend of my wife, Rachel Levine. And I, in turn, am close friends with Paula's former partner, Suzanne Goldberg, who became an unofficial member of the Windsor legal team. But this should come as no surprise. In the lesbian world, it typically is only 1 or 2 degrees of separation rather than 6. Just this past summer, during Family Week in P-Town, Suzanne and Paula's kids, Adam and Julia, Rachel, our son Jacob, Suzanne's partner Mary Lou, and I sat together having drinks at the house we had rented overlooking Provincetown Harbor. Enjoying the sunset, the wine, and the company, we soon started to tell each other stories about Paula. Unfortunately, it would not be appropriate for me to repeat most of those stories here tonight. Suffice it to say that in addition to her many accomplishments obtaining equality for gay people, Paula was someone who really knew how to have a good time. I will admit that one of the stories had something to do with Paula and Rachel trying on various types of push-up bras in a dressing room at Lord & Taylor. But that's all that I will say for now. One thing that I know for sure in life is that no human being knows what life has in store for them. I'm quite sure that as a young girl growing up in a small town in Illinois, Paula Ettelbrick never imagined that an award like this would one day be named in her honor. And I am also certain that when Edie Windsor was a young middle-class woman growing up in Philadelphia after World War II, she had no idea that she would one day become the out lesbian who just happened to sue the United States of America. The same, of course, is true for me. As a closeted lesbian growing up in Cleveland, Ohio in the 1980s, if you had told me that one day, as an out litigation partner at Paul Weiss, I would marry a woman, have a child, and then win a landmark case before the United States Supreme Court, I would have told you that you were certifiably insane. So when I first received the telephone number of a then 80-year-old lady by the name of Edie Windsor, I obviously had no idea that our meeting at her apartment in Greenwich Village the next day would lead to a historic decision by the United States Supreme Court that gay married couples have the same right under our Constitution to be treated with dignity and respect. That straight married couples do. From the very first moment I met Edie, I believed that the best way to convey the harm and indignity that DOMA caused to millions of gay people was to tell the story of how it harmed only 2 people, Edie Windsor and her late spouse, Thea Spire. In order to do this, we told the story of Edie and Thea's lives as the great love story that it was. We used the facts to turn our complaint into a kind of mini biography of Edie and Thea. And perhaps most importantly, we told the story not only of what it's like for gay people today, or yesterday, or 5 years ago, but what it was like for gay men and lesbians in the 1950s, the 1960s, and the 1970s. Like the fact that when Edie Windsor was called in by the FBI for an interview when she was working for the Atomic Energy Commission to support herself in graduate school, she rightfully feared that if the FBI were to ask her if she were a lesbian, she would lose not only her job, but her entire career. Or the fact that Thea first asked Edie to marry her in 1967. You heard me, 1967, 2 years before Stonewall. or the fact that when Thea was diagnosed with a particularly terrible form of MS, Edie has said that the diagnosis happened to both of them, and she made sure that as little in their lives changed as possible. And of course, the $363,000 federal state tax that Edie received upon Thea's death certainly didn't hurt us either. Any American, Democrat or even Republican, can understand what it means to have to pay a huge tax bill simply because you are gay. Facts like these speak for themselves. They tell a story not only of the lives of two women, but of the lives of so many gay Americans of the very generation that this great organization serves. And that is crucial because it is all too easy today to forget what it was like for gay people simply to go about their daily lives openly and with dignity only years ago. In the context of our case at the Supreme Court, this was important for another reason as well. After all, several of the Supreme Court justices themselves are contemporaries of Edie and Thea. Justice Ginsburg, for example, is 80. Justice Breyer is 75. And Justice Kennedy, who of course wrote the majority opinion in Windsor, is 77. One of Justice Kennedy's oldest friends was a man by the name of Gordon Shaber, the longtime dean of the law school where they taught together in Sacramento. Time magazine has reported that Justice Kennedy was aware that Dean Shaber, who died in 1997, was secretly gay. Larry Levine, a professor at the law school who himself is gay and who knows Justice Kennedy, said that he very much doubts that Justice Kennedy and Dean Shaber ever discussed this fact. As Professor Levine has explained, with people of that generation, no one ever talked about it. So several of the Supreme Court justices themselves clearly can remember what it was like for gay people in our country not so long ago. I'm thrilled to be able to say that our strategy appears to have worked. The Supreme Court clearly appreciated the story that we were trying to tell. Here is how Justice Kennedy describes the facts of our case in his opinion. Edith Windsor and Thea Spire met in New York in 1963. While at first Windsor and Spire longed to marry, neither New York nor any other state granted them that right. Concerned about Spire's health, they traveled to Ontario to be married there. Until recent years, many citizens had not even considered the possibility that two persons of the same sex might aspire to occupy the same status and dignity as that of a man and woman in lawful marriage. Even better, this is how Justice Ginsburg recently recounted Edie and Thea's story. These were two people who lived together in a grand partnership, and one of them was dying and wanted to have the official blessings of the government on their union, so they got married. And then one partner died, and the other gets something like a $360,000 estate tax bill from the government. She would have had no bill at all if her marriage were recognized. She'd get the deduction. So that was the DOMA case. I'll admit to you tonight that when I heard this statement from Justice Ginsburg for the very first time, I practically fell over. After all, Edie and Thea's grand partnership was the whole point of our case from day one. The United States Supreme Court's decision in Windsor affirms the basic principle that discrimination against gay people simply because they are gay violates the Constitution. And after all, that's all that the so-called Defense of Marriage Act ever was, a statute whose sole purpose was to demean gay and lesbian Americans in order to treat us as second class, or in the immortal words of Justice Ginsburg, skim milk citizens. You may have heard that the Supreme Court uses the word dignity 10 times in its 26-page opinion for the court. While we all know what that word means, I'm a little compulsive, so I decided to look it up myself. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the word dignity means, quote, the state or quality of being worthy of honor or respect. Sometimes it's the simplest and most obvious things that say the most. The state or quality of being worthy of respect is exactly what the Windsor case was all about. Among many other things, Paula Ettelbrick was justifiably famous for the series of debates that she participated in 25 years ago with her good friend Tom Stoddard, who sadly is also no longer with us today. Tom and Paula traveled the country debating whether and when the LGBT civil rights movement should push for the freedom to marry. I have been told by Tom's husband and my dear friend and Paul Weiss partner Walter Riemann that the object of those debates was to show that people in our community could disagree, yet do so civilly while remaining close friends and allies. And while I know that Paula took the anti-marriage side in those debates with Tom, I am 100% confident that Paula's spirit was dancing, laughing, toasting, even screaming for joy on June 26th when the Supreme Court announced its decision in Windsor. Why am I so confident about this? Because now that the Supreme Court has recognized in Windsor that gay people and their relationships are worthy of equal respect under the Constitution, it's really all over but the shouting. And you don't have to take my word for it. Thanks to the Windsor decision, today was the very first day that gay couples could marry just across the Hudson in New Jersey. When we filed Edie's case in 2010, 5 states, plus the District of Columbia, allowed gay couples to marry. Today, given Chris Christie's decision not to appeal the case, 14 states, plus the District of Columbia do. There has been no movement for civil rights in our country that has achieved that kind of progress that dramatically in that many years. One way to look at this is as if the equivalent of the Battle of Normandy and the great struggle for the civil rights of gay people has been won. In addition to thanking SAGE for this great honor, I have to close tonight by thanking my wife, Rachel Levine, who not only inspires me, and many people in this room know her, so you'll believe this, who not only inspires me in everything that I do, but who has put up with my complete and total craziness for the past 3 years. When I was busy working 80+ hours a week inside in my office as a young lawyer trying to make partner at Paul Weiss, people like Rachel Levine and Paula Ettelbrick and Tom Stoddard and Suzanne Goldberg and former SAGE Board co-chair Larry Channon and my co-honoree and so many others were out on the streets fighting for a cure for AIDS and working to get openly gay people elected to public office. We would be nowhere tonight without them. Thank you so much.
I want to say one more thing. Nothing that happened could have happened without Robbie Kaplan. Okay.